Approximate seating can be checked by trying to insert a 2/1000ths of an inch feeler gauge between the large end of the rollers and the rib of the bearing cone. All 4 sets of rollers should be checked for seating. With all parts seated, the B-cup space, D-cup space, and the C-cone space are measured at 4 places, 90 degrees apart, around the bearing. The average of the 4 readings for each space is then obtained and used as the width for that space. The B, D, and C spacers are then measured to obtain their actual width. The width of the spacers should be parallel within 1/1000ths of an inch. Bearings properly set with end play will always have spacer widths greater than the corresponding spacer gap. The difference between the spacer width and spacer gap measurement is the end play in the set of rollers adjacent to that spacer. The wear in all parts of a used bearing may not be the same, and the end play in each set of rollers may show some differences. Ordinarily, there is not much difference between the sets unless some unusual operating conditions have loaded one end of the bearing severely, or faulty seals at one end of the chock have allowed localized contamination of the lubricants. The bearing setting can be adjusted to the required amount by regrinding each spacer width so that it is wider than the measured space by the amount of the end play desired in the bearing. It is not usually necessary to regrind the spacers until the wear has increased the end play to double the original figure. For instance, on a bearing with a 12/1000ths inch original end play, regrinding of the spacers would not be necessary until the bearing measurement for wear showed 24/1000ths inch end play in the bearing. The general rule when regrinding spacers is to grind the widths to provide for 1 1/2 times the original bearing end play. If the new bearing had called for 12/1000ths inch end play, regrind the spacer to provide 18/1000ths inch end play. The increase over new bearing end play is necessary to compensate for the use of weights during measurement. This is a safety factor to ensure against too tight a setting. A record of the spacer gap and spacer width should be kept on the back side of the roll neck bearing service record card.